here we have Zia Yusuf and Matthew Stadlen having a little bit of a debate on GB News. As much as I disagree with Matthew, I think he's a decent debater. He's intelligent and quick-witted, etc. But like all good debaters, one of the characteristics they have is that slight dose of aggression. And I think in Zia Yusuf, he meets his match. Zia Yusuf is also an excellent debater. But we get here to the heart of the difference between the Labour Party's policy on indefinite leave to remain and reforms.
So, first of all, I've already said I think the Prime Minister got his language wrong. I thought at the time it was a slip-up. He was caught on the hop, which a Prime Minister shouldn't be ideally, of course, in a set-piece interview. But then I think that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, seemed to double down on it today. So I think that's disappointing.
Right,
because I don't think it's I don't speak for them. But
you have an idea.
Well, I can't speak for incompetence and the misuse of language. What I can say is that what the Prime Minister should be doing is explaining why Zia's policy, although it's not racist, will cause huge harm to people who've lived perfectly legitimately in this country. You talk about the Boris waves here. The Labour policy, which is trying to make it harder for people to achieve indefinite leave to remain, will, at least in part, address your concerns on that. You're going far further than that. Let me finish the point before you respond. You're going far further than that. We've already seen the horrors of the Windrush scandal under the Tories. That was a terrible stain on our country, and it offended the British people's sense of fair play. And I think most British people do have a sense of fair play. We cannot afford to repeat the horrors of the Windrush scandal, and your policy, in my view, seriously risks that.
So do you think there are any circumstances? So let's go through a few points. Firstly, the word indefinite leave to remain. What does indefinite mean? It doesn't mean permanent. That's not what indefinite means. It means an indeterminate, uncertain amount of time. Otherwise, it would be called permanent right to remain. So that's the first point to make.
That's just sophistics, isn't it?
That's literally what the word means. And that is why it does not. It means an uncertain. It means an uncertain. It means an uncertain and an undetermined amount of time. That's not at all.
Don't talk over each other. You've just put some points to him, so let him respond. Go on.
So that's the first point. The Home Secretary is well within their rights to make changes to that programme. The second question, then, is if you're looking at this Labour policy, they are, as you said, talking about increasing the waiting period from 5 to 10 years. If at the end of that 10 years, according to a Labour source this morning that I read, who told the Times, it might even be longer than 10 years, and they are increasing the criteria, exactly what Reform are talking about in some ways, which is higher standard of English, no criminal record, and looking at a net economic contribution. Now, still nowhere near where it needs to be to actually ease the burden on the taxpayer. If somebody has been in the country for that period of time and does not meet that criteria, what do you think should happen for them?
I'll answer you. I have no problem in making it harder for people to achieve British citizenship who have come to this country recently. I absolutely think that if you come to this country, as my grandparents did on my father's side, as I believe your parents or grandparents did, you have a responsibility to integrate, to contribute. What I don't think is just, and what I do think offends the British sense of fair play, is your policy, which could and possibly would deport people who have been in this country for potentially decades.
How is that any different to what we just talked about? We have just talked about the path to citizenship remains, and
because
here's the key point.
It's not retrospective. It's not taking something away from people who've been. Be honest, intellectually honest.
Somebody who has been here.
Don't talk over each other.
Let me just make the point before you attempt to rebut it. There is a difference between Labour's policy and your policy. Labour's policy is essentially prospective. It is making it harder for people to get indefinite leave to remain in the first place. You are trying to strip away something that people might have had for decades, and that is a dangerous and shameful policy.
The word indefinite means undetermined and uncertain. People go and look it up. People go and look it up right now. Many countries have such a status, and it is well within the rights of a sovereign nation to determine who gets to stay in their country and who doesn't on the basis that they are not citizens. If they are not citizens, then are you saying that there is no amount of burden that those people can place on the taxpayer that would be worthy of the kind of policy we're talking about? I'll tell you what offends the British sense of fair play, and that is why Reform are leading in the polls. It's because hundreds of billions of pounds being spent at the behest of the British taxpayer to basically fund a food bank for the world. We simply cannot afford it. And the Labour Party, watch what happens in this autumn budget. We are going to see big tax increases. Why? in part because last year alone, 1 in 6 people on universal credit at a cost of £9 billion, are being spent on foreign nationals. That number is going to multiply and balloon. And the proof of that is that even Labour are talking about it, because the Treasury have been in Rachel Reeves' ear about the looming fiscal
catastrophe. Labour have been talking about this, as I've said, since May. So they are well aware of concerns, they are well aware of potential issues. To talk with inflammatory language about people who have been in this country sometimes for many years,
What's
sometimes
the inflammatory
for decades,
language?
to say that they are taking advantage of the food bank of the world, you know exactly what you're doing. That is divisive language, that is inflammatory. The Prime Minister, I think, misspoke, or at least he used language in the wrong way. What you are doing is sowing division. And I can tell you this, there will be hundreds of thousands of people in our country, in our great country, and I am just as proud of our country as you are proud of our country, who will be fearful as a consequence of your policies.
And you see there, most of these arguments that are now coming out from the left relating to the failed multicultural project and that we're seeing the end of now, essentially it's come down to this. You're being nasty. You're being nasty, it's not fair. Well, even if we accept that we are being ruthless, that we're being heartless, that we're being intolerant, that we're being, not showing empathy, etc., all of those things that the left do say, perhaps some of that is true. Perhaps we can't avoid that. But we need to stand up and realise that this country is on the verge of bankruptcy, and unless extremely ruthless and tough decisions are going to be made, then this country is in deep trouble. And perhaps if you are one of those people that is worried about what's going to happen when reform gets into power, I have a little bit of advice for you. Perhaps don't commit any crimes and don't get sent to prison. Perhaps you might want to think of getting a job. And if you're not going to get a job and contribute, and if you're going to get sent to prison for committing offences against the British people, then I'm sorry. You need to be going, because you caught it at the end and you saw Matthew Stadlen's face, which was priceless. And this has to be the attack vector now, because this is what's annoying the left the most. We are not the food bank of the world. Those days are now over. Reform are going to come in and make these sweeping changes, and the country is going to be given a specific choice. Are you going to go with Reform, who are going to make these ruthless hard choices, or are you going to stick with the status quo and watch your country slowly crumble away to nothing, being the food bank of the world? And, this next election, we should hope that there are enough people in this country who recognise the state that we're in, and I think there will be enough people recognise the state that we're in. But, I think all of these arguments, these, intellectual arguments, they're all falling by the wayside. And essentially, it's boiling down to, you're not very nice. Well, perhaps the decisions aren't very nice, but perhaps sometimes in life, you need to take a decision that isn't very nice. And one of the things that we need to bear in mind is that we're not the food bank of the world. Thanks very much for your time.